What is going on, folks? Will Turbot here, aka the one and only true reincarnation of L. Ron Hubbard and sole and rightful owner of all of his mansions, yachts, and jacuzzis. Fake Mike, real news. All right, guys, we're back live. It's always good when we have a new guest and they have to endure the goofy intro, guys. All right, first of all, who's here with us in the chat? Leave us a comment. Share this video, guys. We've been doing a lot of very important videos lately. Check out our recent interview with J. Michael Springman, former U.S. diplomat, that probably Bruce knows as well. Leo Zagami, the live we did the other day. A lot of important stuff. So, guys, please share this videos. And I do a lot of my activism videos because I can go do a video and talk to a few cops and showcase how they don't even literally know the First Amendment, and that'll get thousands of views. But then when I have a dope interview with an esteemed guest like Dr. Bruce Baird here, we need to get pump these numbers up. So guys, please share this video with everybody on your community tabs. Um, Something's going funky with my internet here, so bear with me. I'm gonna just hit one button here, and hopefully we should be good. I don't know what's going on here. All right, so yeah, Dr. Bruce, welcome to Fake Mike Real News. I appreciate you taking the time to do this, and I also want to say
Thank you. You're getting stuck.
all right, can you hear me?
I hear you. You get stuck there, and then it
Okay,
freezes, and then
okay. I think it should be good now. I think it should be good now. Yeah, but you've dedicated your life to the service of others and educating others. And, history is my favorite subject because history is literally the history of every subject. And it's fascinating all the different things that you've covered in your career, too. So I wanted to get into that as well, too. But let's start today with Martin Luther King Jr. Today is his day. This is something that's topical. We'll get him a little bit of clickbait on the title here. But, tell me what you think happened with the assassination of MLK and the events leading up to that.
well, I mean, I was certainly around then. I remember very well when he was assassinated. I was going to junior high school in New Orleans, Louisiana, and there was a lot. It was a mixed junior high school, integrated junior high school then, and in '68, and then '69, the year after. That was really the people were talking about. Oh, there's going to be riots, and the black kids are going to rise up and attack the white kids. I mean, I remember all that kind of stuff. A lot of tension back then. Um, but my early life, I was an engineer. I worked as an engineer for a while. That's what I got a degree in, and it wasn't until the 1980s that I decided to pursue a PhD in history. And I got a master's at William and Mary, and then a PhD at the University of Florida. And then I was a college professor for a while at the University of Alabama in Huntsville. And then I started having to teach U.S. history. And I was always one for my own purposes, asking questions. I mean, I grew up in New Orleans in the time period of the Jim Garrison investigations of the JFK, and I grew up reading the newspapers. I came of age reading about the Garrison
That's awesome.
investigations, and very immersed in it as a kid, right? And so I always had an interest in questioning the official stories and questioning stories of assassinations, even. But I didn't really seriously get into questioning the Martin Luther King assassination until I retired. I retired in 2017 from teaching. I taught at the college level and I taught at the high school level. And there are certain topics that you sort of realize are sort of taboo, things you're not supposed to talk about. I was always pushing the envelope and what you can question. I early started questioning 9/11 and started trying to get my students to question it. But I realized that was something that most of the other teachers, in fact, all the other teachers didn't feel comfortable with, and the administration did not feel comfortable with. And I kept pushing and pushing until I started saying, I know too much now. I just started asking questions that I wasn't supposed to ask and encouraging my students to ask those questions. So I retired. And since then, since 2017, I sort of devoted myself to pursuing questions and coming wherever the evidence took me. And early on, I started questioning the Martin Luther King assassination, because one of the first things I got involved with as part of the 9/11 movement, I joined a little 9/11 group in the Bay Area. And in 2017, they had a film festival. They used this annual film festival, and the guest of honor in that film festival, they did it on 9/11 on 2017, was William Pepper. And William Pepper had written 3 books on the Martin Luther King assassination, and including the most recent one was the plot to kill King, in which he just lays it all out. And he also had been the attorney for the King family in the 1999 civil trial that they brought against this Jowers. I can't remember his first name, but anyway, the guy who had gone on television admitting that he had been involved in the assassination. And he, he'd been for 40 years, had been involved with it. But he came there to talk about everything he'd been working on, including his defense of James Earl Ray, the accused assassin of Martin Luther King, as well as Sirhan Sirhan and Robert Kennedy's, and 9/11, his involvement too, which wasn't much at that point. But I was fascinated about what he had to say about Martin Luther King, which he laid out in this presentation that he did at this film festival. And so at that point, it's like, wow, okay, that blows my mind. I was retired from teaching, so I would have brought this up in my class, but from that point on, every year around the time of the Martin Luther King Day in January, or the time of the assassination anniversary in April, I would tweet something about it, usually something related to the work of William Pepper, and then whatever else I was finding along the way. And so I just did that today. I decided to do it on the Martin Luther King Day 2023 with a hashtag there, just kind of piling together a lot of stuff that I had found along the way, as long as I tap into other people who have also, tweeted. I usually do a lot of the work I do, this kind of breaking stuff on Twitter, like James Corbett had done something, and some really good interviews with William Pepper. And in fact, the thing that really struck me the most, and struck everybody at that first at the talk that William Pepper gave, was that the bullet had not killed Martin Luther King. Martin King was actually alive when he was on the balcony, and they brought him to the hospital, St. Joseph's Hospital there in Memphis, and he was alive. And the staff started working on it. And now I just posted this today. There was this interview of William Pepper describing this, as well as it's been described in a lot of talks that he's given and articles written about what he's written. But on this, you just see him actually saying that the staff was working to save him, and then the head of the chief of neurosurgery there at St. Joseph's, his name was Breen Bland, I believe, Dr. Breen Bland, chief of neurosurgery, said, "Stop trying to say that, nigger. Get out of here." And he chased these out, all the people that were in there working out, and then there was 2 plainclothes men that were with him. He went in there, and the chief nurse, who was like the last one to leave, was close to the door, heard them. They went, and they all spit on King's body. He was still alive still. And then he proceeded to take a pillow, and he suffocated Martin Luther King. And that is the way, as William Pepper describes it, that's the way Martin Luther King actually died. That's what he died from, being suffocated by the chief of neurosurgery at St. Joseph Hospital, who happened to be the family doctor of the guy who was the head of the Dixie Mafia in Memphis. And so there was William Pepper said there was 2 pieces of evidence. They had the chief nurse, who had died by the time he was taking evidence, but the son, who remembered the mother the day after King died, bringing her family together in the room, in the den or whatever, and telling her this exact story. And he recalled it under oath. And on video, he told exactly the story that his mother had told him back, like 40 years earlier. And they said he was very believable because he was blind. He had cancer. It was like he had nothing to hide or whatever. And the other person was the son of this Dixie Mafia chief, who remembers being in the meeting with the doctor, who he knew was the family doctor, and saying that if he happens to live, make sure he comes to St. Joseph's and he'll take care of it. The doctor telling the father, the guy who's the head of the Dixie Mafia there, that he could take care of him. So 2 pieces of evidence to support this rather, I mean, crazy story. I mean, everybody was shocked when they heard that. It's like, what the heck is that? Besides the fact of all the trail of the FBI involvement and the state Tennessee government and the Memphis police and naming the shooter who actually had fired the rifle. I mean, this was outstanding stuff. And the fact that mainstream news either doesn't cover it or just dismisses it, this is, to me is insane. It's just this astounding stuff that really people should be checking this out. But people are like afraid of it or hide from it, or they just don't see it. They don't know it. To me,
if I could, since you brought up Sirhan Sirhan, I find him particularly fascinating because of some of the tapes that they have him trying to kind of, in my opinion, elicit a confession from him. Have you listened to some of the tapes? What's your thoughts on Sirhan Sirhan in general and his motivations?
The Wim Pepper wrote a bit about that as well, because he was the attorney, or at least he was trying to be the attorney for Sirhan Sirhan to had been contacted to be the attorney for Sirhan Sirhan to get him freed from jail. And I don't remember who said it, but there's also other people. Unlike Martin Luther King, a lot of other people have written about Sirhan Sirhan, including his son, Robert Kennedy Jr., who generally tends to follow the line of the CIA did things, but he definitely, doesn't tend to believe that it was, Lee Harvey Oswald, the Sirhan Sirhan, who killed his father, Sirhan Sirhan. But the story that I've heard is that he was brainwashed, that he didn't know he was doing, that he was standing in front and he fired the gun, but he didn't fire it at Robert Kennedy. He fired it on the ground or up in the air, and that the shot that killed Bobby Kennedy, came from behind him. And the person that did that was his security guard. And the whole story of people trying to make sure that he ended up where he was supposed to be at the time, in the kitchen there in the convention center. Just like when you read about Pepper, that there were people close to Martin Luther King who wanted to make sure he was on the balcony there on the third floor of that hotel in Memphis with a clear shot, a clear angle from the shots that came, which they don't believe came from where James Earl Ray was, but from the bushes that were out there in front. And it was a sharpshooter who they actually named the sharpshooter. It was a Memphis police sharpshooter. And so said a lot of people have found all kind of evidence to show Sirhan Sirhan could not possibly have fired. He didn't. Nobody saw him actually shoot Bobby Kennedy, and the shot could only have come from behind him. The powder burns came from really close. So I've heard that. I haven't dug too much. One of the persons that I've followed very closely, who does dig into the backstory of the motivation for who would have killed Kennedy, digging deeper than saying just the CIA did it or whatever. I call that sort of a limited hangout. The idea that it's somehow the deep state or some politicians or group of politicians or CIA or the military industrial complex, that a guy named Michael Collins Piper, I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he's done a lot of work on the JFK assassination. These were definitive work on the JFK assassination called Final Judgment. And it's a wide sweeping book, but in it, he talks about MLK and also at great length on Bobby Kennedy's assassination. And he finds that the fingers point to Mossad. He makes a big case, especially for JFK, that he finds all the reasons why the Mossad and the Israelis in general would have wanted to kill JFK over especially of the issue of Kennedy's opposition to their Israeli development of a nuclear program. It was a big issue for David Ben-Gurion, who was the president of or prime minister of Israel at the time. And also it was that Bobby Kennedy, despite a lot of the Anti-Defamation League, they tried to describe Martin Luther King and Bobby Kennedy as friends of Israel. Every day, every anniversary, the ADL comes out and says, he was they support Martin Luther King and Bobby Kennedy as great supporters of Israel. Well, they were starting to get into a position where they could question Israel. And also Bobby Kennedy questioned who killed his brother. and a lot of those fingers were pointing at Israel, and reason why Israel would have had a big, strong motivation, as well as having the means and opportunity to have killed him, and who would have brainwashed Sirhan Sirhan, or who would have, been at some level behind it. So Michael Collins Piper, I recommend Final Judgment to anybody very interested in any of those assassinations in the 60s. He is a lot of things to consider if you go through that. He didn't get into the detail that Michael Collins Piper and Martin Luther King. He basically says, I'm not going to be Martin Luther King. He said, Pepper won't look at the Israeli angle, and Michael Collins Piper doesn't go too much into that for Martin Luther King, but he says there's enough evidence to check out, go deep into what kind of connection the Israeli government, as Mossad, might have had with the Martin Luther King assassination.
And so, regardless of what it is and where it's ultimately being manufactured from, you've got the period of the assassinations, and then you got kind of like the serial killer period, and then you get to like the terrorism period.
Right. Yeah.
And so maybe we can circle back to serial killers later. But starting with the terrorism angle in the late 80s through the 90s, really, and kind of continuing to this day in different forms. I was last year at the 25th anniversary of the Oklahoma City bombing, and there was shout outs to the activists that were there. There was a small group of activists that were there. They have the museum there that totes the official story, and this is one of the situations that I think is a little above some of the newer people's time. It's beyond their years. A little happened before their time.
Yeah.
If you could give us a
historian's subject.
Well, I mean, I was a kid. I was like, wow. I remember it happening. I was like 12, 13, 10, around there when it was happening. And there were certain events that they'll wheel in the TV to extra traumatize the kids, so they see the fires and the ambulance and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Great, they leave a great mark. But can you give people kind of an overall, or take your time with it, but why the official story of Oklahoma City is probably not what they told us it was? And this is just yet another event occurring, and these are just not small events, but these are massive events, and we're not getting the full story, bare minimum.
Right. Well, I happen to have done a lot of research on Oklahoma City. I haven't really published it on Twitter very much, little bits, but I'm working on chapters in this book that I have on my website called The Telltale Crater, where it focuses on large explosions, like massive explosions that kill, dozens of hundreds of people and destroy large parts of cities like Oklahoma City, and have craters. They produce craters, which, as I show over and over again, a lot of things I've tweeted, truck bombs cannot blast craters. They cannot blast a crater. The one in Oklahoma City is like 32 feet diameter by about 8 feet deep, which maybe it doesn't sound too big, but a truck bomb, which is, where the explosives, however much ANFO or whatever high explosives they want to put in a truck bomb, it's 3 foot off the ground, at the truck bed level, cannot blast a crater. And I go back and I've looked at the whole history of analyzing craters, like explosive craters. How do you, these people who've been planning explosive events, going back 200-300 years, when they've been under, mining walls of castles and such like that. So on that basis, on that grounds, a truck bomb can't do it. Then this misses the whole official story of the Oklahoma City bombing, which then, leads you to question everything else about the official story and how convenient. And when if you study one and, out of, just one by itself, maybe you would think, well, I don't know, maybe that's an exception. But I studied so many of them now that I realized, there's a pattern. It's always the same kind of official story, some kind of truck bomb, some kind of terrorist. And they leave a crater, which a lot of times they do, ever since really attack on the Marine barracks in Lebanon in October 1983, they left nice craters. And in fact, it's part of, even Oklahoma City, it was the crater marked ground zero. for everybody. The crater, the explosion happened. How did they know there was the truck bomb? Well, there are bits and pieces of truck bomb parts they found all over the city, including always an axle. They always seem to find an axle or maybe a crankshaft or something, and then little bits of it. And it's okay, well, maybe that's but the thing that shows it was a truck bomb was there was a crater, and it shows exactly where the point was. And so I show, well, that wasn't a truck bomb that caused it. And in fact, what I ended up showing was that that could only have been caused by an underground explosion. And the amount of explosives would have been in the order of, like 10 to 20 tons of high explosives, which you're just not going to get under the ground out of a hat, right? It's really hard to get that much high explosives, so that it would have had to have been what I call a micro nuke. Other people up there too. There was like these micro nukes all over the world, these explosives, and these supposed truck bombs are caused by these micro nukes, which is totally out of the realm of terrorists. Terrorists don't have these micro nukes. It's very sophisticated technology, very sophisticated. Even for nuclear states, can't develop these kind of micro nukes. It's much more sophisticated than these, primitive bombs they've been making since Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I mean, a lot of states can make those kind of. North Korea can make those kind of bombs. Pakistan, India, they can. But these kind of really sophisticated, small, very small, like we're talking 50 pounds, and being placed under the ground somehow, either through the sewer system or through some kind of road work that would happen to be going on, and placed under. So, and it realized that the only people who had these, it comes down to the only states who really had the power to develop this kind of technology and had the means and the opportunity to do it. Like 5 of them, all of them 5 that developed these kind of technology, and the kind of, especially looking at, are the kind that don't leave residual radiation, because nobody ever reports any kind of residual radioactivity in these places. So, say, well, there can't be a nuke. Well, I show that, yes, we've been working on since the 1950s. The United States has, and also other states have. But number one potential culprit there is Israel, as the only one that doesn't come clean or doesn't have investigation of their nuclear program, and has also been working on these things. And they would be working on these things to be able to snip in someplace, plant these micro nukes, cause a huge explosion, blame it, and also have the power to control the media enough and enough of the academia and the governments, and could blackmail people or terrorize people into promoting the story that some terrorist, whether it's an Arab or Timothy McVeigh or whoever, could create those kind of backstories. In fact, create the backstory. The story is there. The script is there before the event even happens. And people have found that all over these. They talk about these predictive programming, and like people know these things are going to happen. What is the purpose of telling people these things are going to happen? And then how quickly they identify who the criminal was, who was the terrorist who did this. Like always within 24 hours, bam, bam, they're going to get that guy. 24 hours, 24 hours, they're going to get him, right? That same story over and over again. So yeah, for these ones like Oklahoma City, I said I've worked on some material. The hardest part for me is not the means and the opportunity to do it, but is who did it? Who had the motive to do it? So what would be the motive for whoever pulled off something involving a micro nuke? And again, in my work, it's controversial. I see the fingers tend to point to Israel. And so I make that out. And I said, I haven't really published this yet, but I make a case. And again, Michael Collins Piper and his work, he has a later work that he's done where he also identifies Israel and the motivation they might have had for Oklahoma City. Most of what the motivation seems to be is either nuclear, what do they call it? Nuclear, not threatening people, nuclear extortion, extorting something they want from the governments of these countries, not just the United States, but many countries around the world, or terrorizing people, getting people and these governments to join in their war on terror, which Israel started back in 1979. So again, a lot of people, it's like, I don't plan to come up with Israel every time, but it seems like, dang, whether I dig questions I ask, it seems to keep pointing toward, and I just say Israel. I don't know which part of Israel, what groups of Israel, whatever involved, but it seems to do that, which again says, well, these terrorists that they're identifying, the governments officially identify, are not the people involved with it. They're patsies, just like Lee Harvey Oswald. They were set up for this. They're involved in some way or another, but basically their role is patsies. So probably more than you wanted to hear about the Oklahoma City bombing. But
Well, no, actually, I'm genuinely curious. I respect your opinion, and I'm curious to know what you have to say. So, I guess this question would be to follow up as twofold. If it is Israel, do you think that they're the ultimate power behind the throne? Do you think they're the chief arbiters of global affairs? And how? What is their motivation to do that? Because from a strictly like regular point of view, Israel's our friends. You know what I'm saying? Why would they
Right? Yeah.
hurt us? And in certain ways, they work with us, and I could give certain examples of why they don't. So yeah, do you think it's Israel at the bottom of the rabbit hole? And then if so, regardless, what's their motivation to assassinate? I mean, you kind of laid it out with that, but what would be the motivation? And then we don't even really have to talk about 9/11, but kind of know what's up, in
Right.
Oklahoma City. So what's their motivation there?
You know, there are people who will point the finger at some bigger conspiracy, like the Freemasons is a very popular one, that's somehow behind Israel, behind the United States, is some greater power, some in like the Freemasons. Um, I don't really have evidence. I can't follow those lines. To me, a lot of times I feel people who want to identify some nameless group are like distracting. I mean, it's if people won't even talk about Israel's role in these events, like the possible role of Israel's role in these events, or them being the number one suspect in these events, then talking about something beyond them is just trying to distract me from what I do know, more specifically the evidence that points toward Israel. Is there something behind Israel? Well, I'm sure there's something behind. Or the Rothschild, I don't know. What is it behind all these countries? Is it there are people that I will follow, and on Twitter, and because I like their work, but I know that when it comes down to nukes, mini nukes or whatever kind of nukes, and Israel, they won't go there. And a lot of times they will shy away from pointing the finger at Israel and point it to some deep state or the mob or something that's nameless, faceless. And to me, it's like they're purposefully avoiding naming something that would mean something to people, unless you just want to get swept up by this bigger conspiracy that you can just talk about forever and never have any evidence for. Let's like me talk about 9/11. I mean, I have done a lot of research on 9/11, but it's so vast and so complex that I say, well, let's start with these smaller ones. If you can't deal with smaller bombings, and these smaller issues, like Oklahoma City is a perfect one. If you can't deal with that, then you're no way you're ever going to understand what happened in 9/11. It's just so much more complex than Oklahoma City or these other, like one of the ones I wish people really would focus is the 1983 bombing of the U.S. Marine barracks in Beirut. It's very straightforward, but people will not touch that. They will not go there. They'll talk about the USS Liberty. It's like, oh, yeah, I can talk about the USS Liberty very freely, Israel, because there's somehow this plausible deniability that is an accident, that Israel didn't mean to do it. And like whoever the powers that be allow people to talk about USS Liberty. But those same people, I'll say, hey, but what about what happened in 1983? Oh, no, they won't go there. They just absolutely will not consider
Yeah.
that Israel might have killed, 251 U.S. Marines. Oh, they'll kill all those sailors, the the NSC or whatever, not necessarily the I can't remember which, but the national, what is it? The one that owned the USS Liberty. It was the NHS. Yeah, I don't know, whatever. But anyway, that they can talk about that. They can talk about earlier, Israeli operations that have been officially acknowledged by the Israelis, but not. They won't go like, especially one of the most recent things I talk about is the August 2020 bombing in Beirut, the Beirut blast, which has sort of been forgotten now because it's over 2.5 years ago. But I did a lot of stuff on like right away, because I recognized from all the stuff I'd done what was going on there, and got a lot of attention first, and then it's like, but nobody else will go there. So a lot of things I'm on my own. I'm the only one who tweets on some of these things because they simply won't go places because it tends to point to Israel. And they don't. That's not allowed on. I call it so-called alternative media. I call it scam. Slash that. They just won't touch it. I said, wow, the evidence is there. Nobody questions my evidence. Nobody challenges the evidence that I put out there. And I have like 45,000 tweets, tweeting all this stuff out there and long threads. And, it gets attention, but no, everybody else, they're not going to touch that stuff. So.
Yeah, and unfortunately, for better, well, obviously for worse, you definitely have to tread lightly to even participate in the digital landscape nowadays. So I do find myself, admittedly, using code words here and doing even some self-censorship to
Oh, yeah.
get the message out, because otherwise then I would just not be talking to anybody. My idea is to try to get the message to people. So sometimes I'll say this or say that, and it's true. I think it's very basic level understanding when people say it's the Jesuits, it's the Jews, it's the Freemasons, it's this or that, and they just like, oh, okay, but it's just them. My personal opinion is, as far as Israel's concerned, with the Balfour Declaration, and I think the people that were instrumental behind World War II and the planning of the United Nations, this is just my personal opinion here. I think they put Israel there to kind of be like their personal. I don't even want to say personal, because there is definitely some autonomy there. But their little personal place in the Middle East, where they could run intelligence operations, they could just get their nice little foothold in there.
Oh, yeah.
And I think they've been working with the Anglo-American establishment for a long time and helped create Israel. And to your point, there's a lot of things like China's. Like Israel's got a whole bunch of back doors into all of our tech with all the intel inside. I mean, everything. And
the promise software back in the 80s and all that. You familiar with that?
And then you have them working with China on the Belt and Road initiative too. Could you speak a little bit about the Belt and Road initiative? And I mean, because to me this is a fascinating subject that doesn't get enough airtime. Just because this is a complete restructuring of the world, and then you've got these smart cities, you've got China working with Israel and Russia, and it's equipped to be potentially militarized with these ports. It's a very interesting thing. If you could kind of talk about that for a little bit, I'd be fascinated.
You mean like the multipolar world versus the sort of Western powers that be? And I just know about that casually from reading.
Well, the Belt and Road initiative is this, and a lot of people.
Yeah, I know, to go across Asia to connect China and Russia, and to give them an alternative way to access all these ports. And to me, do I believe in a multipolar world? I think multipolar world, yeah. I know enough about the bad things the United States has done over the years and Western Europe has done. I don't think it can be a worse thing, but are they all somehow also? I tend to think there's somebody behind all of that too. So that's why I get into, like, do I want to make somebody the good guys? I don't think so. I just know too much about history to know that none of these people are really good guys. But if they can fight against each other, was the Cold War really that bad? Versus when but who was behind the Cold War? I don't know. But we didn't have World War III during the Cold War. So I really, a lot of the work I tend to do is just as an historian. I get interested in some kind of problem, and I see it as interesting to me, and so I dig into it. But I don't tend to read a lot of books by historians because I find they usually are very sort of limited hangouts. They're not very helpful. So I tend to want to get as much as I can into primary research evidence, and whatever I can find, which really a lot of stuff I find via Twitter. And also newspaper searches. I have like newspaper entries I can go in, even though I don't think newspapers are telling us the story. But if you look at enough of them at the time period when things are happening, you find little bits of this and this and that that's sort of been forgotten, and yet show up. The most interesting stuff you find on any disaster day, any day that is on the first day, in the first few hours. And sometimes those get preserved in the newspapers in the old times, and now get preserved in some videos that people take then, and it's almost, they don't get wiped clean. You look at it and say, oh, well, there's something nobody's ever talked about. So the bigger story behind all of it, I tend to think if somebody can use the stuff I found, the stuff I'm finding that I'm staking, as I'm a professional historian. I mean, I have a PhD in history, and I have even though I don't have much standing among academia anymore, or if I ever did, that I'm going to stake myself. I'm going to stake my name to this. I said, I put my name on this. I'm not just retweeting somebody. I'm putting my name to this, and I want somebody to come challenge me, come take me on. Where am I wrong? Which they don't do. I'm the kind. I think at this point they just ignore. They choose. They can ignore me and not give me any attention because whatever. They don't disappear me. I've never gotten disappeared from Twitter, from all these things, and I'm pretty outrageous. You would think from some people's perspective, pretty outrageous the things I say, but I back it up. Everything. I want other people to be able to come to the same conclusions that I did. So, but beyond the stuff that I write about, which is pretty sweeping to me, like looking at every major explosion in the last 100 years, and that left a crater, or no, now I'm looking at some of these missiles that have been created huge explosions in Syria and Yemen. And I'm working on a thread, trying to, usually with Twitter, I'm trying to find an angle that I could actually go with, something that could be accessible to other people rather than just something that's, evidence, totally just a bunch of pieces of evidence. I want something I can kind of tell a story through it before I really want to put it on Twitter. But I mean, I'm posting most of the stuff I do on Twitter. Eventually it'll go onto my website as this book project. But I try to stick close to the evidence, and I just can't. I can make statements about Israel, which are pushing it to me, really pushing it, because really saying who did something is really hard. But I have to say why, on what grounds. To me, it's like means, motive, and opportunity. And if I can figure out motive, if I can figure out some plausible motive to somebody who has the means and opportunity, then I can say so-and-so had the means, motive, and opportunity to do this. And they said that so far they pointed to Israel whenever I can reach that point. I can't make that case for the Russians or the Americans a lot of times for these events. So,
all right, I got two more questions, and I saved the spicy questions for last. And you've been very generous with your time. I appreciate it a lot. I'm going to save some of these other questions. Hopefully, we can do another interview in the next month or so, because I got a ton of questions now. There are these societies, the Harvard, the Scroll and Key, Skull and Bones at Yale, where they do some pretty ridiculous stuff. I actually caught a guy coming out of Skull and Bones one time, and I said, "Hey, do you beat off in a coffin?" And he's like, "No, do you?" And I was like, I was just dumbstruck. I should have asked more questions, but I actually caught a dude coming out of there. And then you, I believe, went to William and Mary. Is that correct too?
Right. Yeah.
Now,
I got my master's there I was there for a couple of years in the late 80s.
So now this is submitted. These next two questions were submitted, so I promise I get them on. This is real conspiratorial here. What about the rumors of tunnels beneath William and Mary, and maybe the fraternities doing some weird stuff with the tunnels, or maybe they were running I don't know what the hell, moonshine. That's way before moonshine times though, so they wouldn't be run. What's up? Are there any tunnels below William and Mary? And if so, what would you theorize their purpose might be?
Well, I was fell in love with history before I went to William and Mary. So I love the fact that it's right next to Colonial Williamsburg, and there's a couple of very old buildings there. The Wren Building, supposedly designed by Christopher Wren, and it's right there. But those things that William and Mary has always been a public college. It's never been a private, even though it was the third college after Harvard and Yale in America. It was always a public school, and it still is a public school. So it's a lesser school, college, lesser than the University of Virginia. And in Virginia, they divide up all of the doctoral programs, the PhD programs, and I think William and Mary had 4 compared to most of them at University of Virginia. So it's a very small school, but it's a very nice campus. I've walked all over that campus many times. I've taken all the historical tours, and I never heard anybody talk about tunnels there. It's not a dorm system like, on, let's say, Harvard. I mean, if there was, most of the dorms are newer dorms. They're not old dorms. The old buildings are like the Wren Building and a couple of administrative type buildings. So I don't know anything about tunnel. Nobody ever said anything when I was there. But I don't, I think Phi Beta Kappa began there. I think are supposed.
I believe.
It's like they had some of the Greek societies that were there, but they were more. I never heard anything really. Well, one of the other things that when I was professor, I did a study of dueling. That was one of the things I was going to do a book on dueling, and I studied a lot about William and Mary in the late 1700s in dueling, and they had this time period where there were all these students coming from the Blue Ridge, from the back country, these Scots Irish guys who were really tough and rougher fighters, and then they had all these would be aristocrats from the East Coast, from the shore, and they got involved in a lot of duels. But again, so I got a lot into what the students were like in the late 1700s, early 1800s, but I don't remember anything about secret stuff going on there, like
Okay,
even
gatekeeper.
societies,
Sure.
even really.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. All right. So I got one more that's kind of a weird one too. So, this is something that I never used to ever cover on this channel, because if I can't get you to realize that the Federal Reserve System is BS, or that 2 planes can't knock down 3 towers, I'm not getting into this next subject. However, now on Tucker Maddow in the Pentagon and John Podesta's friend over there and the dude from Fallout Boy, they're saying, hey, UFOs are real. One of the things we've been talking about tonight is I would argue psychological operations, regardless of whether they're part of the US or Israel or a combination of them and other players. These are some psychological operations that are going on now. And so for the last, 70, 100 years, I don't even know, people that looked into UFOs were debunked and they were weird. And now Tucker Maddow and the Pentagon are saying UFOs are real.
Are you saying Tucker Maddow, like Rachel Maddow and
they're 2 heads of the same bird. I call
okay,
them
all right, the
Maddow.
fox and the scene.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
You call him Tucker Maddow. All right, I get it. All right.
Yeah. So, like, as somebody that studied the operations for a long time, in assuming that this is an operation, why are they telling us that we have a tic tac and that the Pentagon's on it with John Podesta?
Are you saying, why does our government carry out psychological operations against the American people? Or
no, what I'm asking is, I'm thinking, like, stuff's not going on the news unless it's run by the Pentagon, the CIA. That's just my
it's controlled by somebody. I know that for sure.
It's
especially more today than it was.
Yeah. I mean, the Council on Foreign Relations, BlackRock, Vanguard. There's a number of people that have overlapping interest on that. But why all of a sudden the shift? Because assuming this is like some type of psychological, because for a long time, if you're just the societal engineers, put your monocle on, right, and pretend you're one of the societal engineers with the big cigar. We will tell them aliens are real today, and the Pentagon confirms it. Why is this happening now? Why are they telling us this now?
You mean that somewhere down the road they're going to tell us the Earth is being invaded by aliens, and so they sort of prepared us for this?
No, I'm
reality?
just genuinely curious, because
I think they might do that. They might do that sometime in the future.
I think that is a possibility too, for sure. I definitely think that is a possibility.
People would still believe, and they would believe it. I think they talk about. There have been a lot of study of the Orson Welles and his 1938 War of the Worlds radio program. That supposedly, now I've read some stuff that a lot of that was hype. In terms of what
they say really some of it was, but yeah.
But still, I know people have studied it as a precursor maybe for what how to manipulate people into believing crazy stuff, as we know with COVID or whatever. Anything they want you to believe, they can do that. And I'm always shocked. I mean, my own kids, I've raised to question everything, and they can just totally, this younger generation, like your generation. My kids are in their late 20s or 30s, and they're like, you don't question stuff? Like, I encourage you to question stuff, and they don't. And they're because they're cohorts, their peers, they don't question stuff. I said, oh my God, heaven help us, if nobody's going to question this anymore. Because I know people older than my father's generation doesn't question stuff. And most of my generation doesn't question stuff. But I hope the younger generation, when I was a high school teacher, I used to have a lot of these high school kids, and then I get them to question. And I realized as I was getting ready to retire, they would question stuff in my class, because that's what I was encouraging to do. They'd write an essay questioning stuff. But the minute they left my class, boom, it's over. And I did, oh, shoot, all that time wasted trying to get them, because they won't. They realize very early on.
It's not wasted, though, because, you still taught them that will stay with them. And even if some of them was beat out of them, it's only because they're conforming to get that grade, because they want to get it afterwards. And I can tell you, man, I had a few really good teachers that changed my life because I had a subpar experience overall. But it's just those ones that give you that spark to question things and just even allow you to question things yourself.
Plant a
Uh,
seed in your head somewhere.
and that's all it takes. So thank you for planting countless seeds, and really thank you for you're using your power to do good. I mean, and promoting that in your class until you unfortunately no longer could, is because
Yeah.
we definitely need this. We need as many people as we can, and that guys goes for you guys in the chat. I want to thank Dr. Bruce Baird for being here. Support his work. His links are in the description. Go give him a follow on Twitter. Let him know that Fake Mike sent you. I get the easy job. Dr. Bruce, he does decades of research. I ask him a few questions, and now you guys have to you and Bruce do all the backbreaking work while I sit here and look pretty. You guys got to share the video. You guys got to get the video out and support Dr. Bruce.
They can contact me too, via my Twitter or via my website. I respond to anybody who has a serious, interest in any of this stuff. Plus a lot more that they talk about.
And I'd just like to say too, lastly, I could maybe help you out with your website a little bit too, to spice it up, give you some feedback, some ideas, and then also too, man, we gotta get you on when you get these books out, and there's some ideas I've been looking into for self-publishing and different ways to get your book published. I have a whole squad of nerds this is all we do. So I'll be in touch with you behind the scenes.
Yeah, I like that
as well too, because
I can help with.
Okay, yeah, because I don't want to spill all the beans here, but that's something that I could definitely help you with, and it would also be something that I would have no control over. I would just tell you what to do. You set up the password. You do this. I would have no control over that. But yeah, I'll definitely be in touch with you, man. I appreciate you giving me this time on a weekday too, and man,
Martin Luther King Day.
I'm Martin Luther King Day too, man. I appreciate it. So it's nice to finally meet you, Dr. Bruce, and I'll look forward to talking to you in the next few days. I'm going to send you a message, brother.
All right, thank you, Fake Mike.
All right.